Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going on a deep dive
Ooh,
into the world of Antisthenes. You
interesting.
might not recognize the name, but this is someone who really kind of shook things up in ancient Greek philosophy.
Really?
Yeah. He was a real pioneer
Okay.
for a whole school of thought that we know as cynicism.
Interesting.
And he was someone who wasn't afraid to challenge some of the biggest names of his time, like even Plato.
Oh, wow.
So it's really fascinating to kind of dig into, these figures
Yeah.
who might not be household names,
Right.
but who really had a profound impact
Totally.
on the course of history.
It's amazing how these kind of hidden figures
Yeah.
can shape so much of what we think about.
Exactly. And we've got some really great material to work with.
Okay.
We've got biographical details, we've got fragments of his writings, and we've got perspectives from later philosophers who wrote about him.
So we're piecing together this puzzle to try and figure out who this guy was.
Yeah. And we're on a mission to understand,
Yeah.
who he was, what he believed, and why it matters even today.
Right.
So let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
Antisthenes was born in Athens around 446 BCE,
Okay.
but there's this kind of mystery surrounding his mother.
Oh.
Some sources say that she was Thracian. Others say that she was Phrygian.
Oh, interesting.
And get this.
Okay.
When people would question Antisthenes' Athenian citizenship, he had the best comeback.
Really?
He would point out that even the mother of the gods,
Oh, wow.
Cybele,
Yeah.
a major figure in Anatolia, was of Phrygian origin.
So he's using that to
Yeah.
kind of poke at those Athenian ideas.
He was so witty.
Yeah.
I mean, he was clearly not someone to shy away from a debate or, a challenge to his identity.
He seems very comfortable with himself.
He really does. And speaking of strong personalities,
Yeah.
Antisthenes was a seriously dedicated student of Socrates.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, this guy would walk all the way from Piraeus to Athens
Wow.
every day just to hear Socrates speak.
That's a commitment.
That is commitment.
That's a commute.
It is. And that really shows you the impact that Socrates had on him.
Yeah, I mean, you don't do that for just anybody.
You don't. And another thing that must have had a huge impact on him
Okay.
was the fact that he was actually present
Oh, wow.
at Socrates' death.
Mm.
I mean, can you imagine witnessing the execution of your mentor?
Yeah.
Someone you revered,
Right.
someone you'd learned so much from?
It's like seeing your hero.
It is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
how did that shape his thinking?
Yeah.
How does that shape his own worldview?
Total.
I mean, it's like this defining moment where you
Oh.
see the consequences of challenging societal norms.
It's almost like this experience just ignites a fire in him
Yeah.
and pushes him to be like, I have to really live a virtuous life.
Yes, and to live authentically.
Yeah.
And that really leads us to kind of like the core of Antisthenes' own philosophy.
Okay.
Because he wasn't just about theory.
Mhm.
He really walked the walk.
Okay.
He embraced a super simple life.
Yeah.
And he even had this like signature look.
Really?
Yeah. Like cloak staff wallet,
Oh, wow.
which became kind of like the trademark
Okay.
of his followers.
Interesting.
It's like a uniform
Yeah.
almost.
Okay.
And that simple life was a deliberate rejection
Hmm.
of all that Athenian obsession
Rough.
with material wealth
All that status.
and status. Exactly. He believed that happiness came not from what you own,
Right.
but from living virtuously.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's like you're in control of your own happiness,
Yeah.
not these external things.
And that meant mastering your desires,
Oh, wow.
focusing on inner strength.
It's about mastering yourself,
Yes.
not the things around you.
And that's so powerful,
Yeah.
Imagine finding true contentment not in external possessions,
Right.
but in your ability to live with integrity and purpose.
Yeah. It's real freedom.
It is.
It's powerful.
Okay, but so far we've just talked about the broad strokes.
Yeah.
What did he actually believe?
Right.
What was his philosophical system all about?
Okay, so for Antisthenes, virtue was everything.
Right.
It was the only true good. He actually saw pleasure
Yeah.
as like unnecessary, even dangerous.
Really?
Yeah, he really argued that real happiness comes from being self-sufficient, needing nothing but yourself for fulfillment.
Okay, that's radical.
It is.
And he even went so far as to say that a bad reputation could be a good thing.
What?
Pain. How does that work?
I don't know. I've never seen that on an inspirational poster.
No.
But it's so interesting because
Okay.
he's saying, like, true virtue shouldn't depend on what other people think.
Yeah.
It's like doing the right thing, even when it's unpopular.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
So it takes real strength of character to kind of stand by your principles,
Yes.
even when society disapproves.
It's like he's emphasizing internal strength over external validation.
I love that.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is, and it sounds like he was really kind of emphasizing this internal strength
Yeah.
and this resilience in the face of these external pressures.
It's like marching to the beat of your own drum.
Yes.
Even if it means facing criticism or rejection.
And it sounds like Antisthenes was a pretty radical thinker.
Oh, yeah.
Even for his time.
Definitely.
And he had some really interesting ideas about language and logic, too.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like questioning some pretty fundamental concepts.
Totally. So he was really skeptical of like abstract concepts. He thought that we could only really know and describe the world through our direct experiences.
So he was very grounded.
He was. He famously said,
"Oh, yeah.
A horse I can see, but horsehood I cannot see."
I like that.
Yeah.
Very concrete.
Yeah, he was all about keeping things real.
So he was really focused on practical wisdom and how to live a virtuous life.
Yes.
Rather than getting lost in these theoretical abstractions.
Totally. He thought that philosophy shouldn't be just intellectual gymnastics.
Yeah.
It should be a guide to action.
It's like he's saying, stop worrying about the why of everything and focus on the how to live a good life.
Exactly. And a good life for him meant a virtuous life.
Right.
He was a man of action.
And speaking of action, he is often considered the founder of cynicism.
Right. Yeah.
And I've always wondered, did he ever actually like hang out with Diogenes?
Ooh.
You know, Diogenes. Oh, the guy in the barrel?
Yeah, the guy who lived in a barrel. So like we have this lineage, Socrates to Antisthenes to Diogenes.
Yeah.
And I always try to picture like, are they all like in a room together? What are they talking about? It's a good question. And that's where things get kind of murky.
Really?
Yeah. The historical record is actually unclear about whether they ever actually met.
What?
Some scholars even think that Diogenes arrived in Athens after Antisthenes died.
Oh, wow.
It's like a historical mystery.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out the connections, the influences, the real story behind the legend.
So even though Antisthenes may not have the same name recognition as like a Plato or an Aristotle, his ideas have really resonated through the centuries.
They have.
And you can see how they influenced countless thinkers and really shaped the course of Western thought.
Totally.
His focus on virtue self-sufficiency and challenging conventional wisdom, it all feels surprisingly relevant today. You know?
It does.
It's like he's offering us this blueprint for living a more authentic, meaningful life.
Totally.
One that's grounded in inner strength and this deep understanding of ourselves.
I like that.
And that's what we'll explore further as we delve deeper into Antisthenes' philosophy.
I'm excited, me too.
Keep going.
But that, my friend, is a conversation for the next part of our deep dive.
I'll be here.
All right.
Can't wait. Welcome back, everyone. Last time we were talking about Antisthenes and how he was such a radical thinker.
Challenging the status quo.
Yeah. And his ideas about virtue.
Yeah. What would he have to say about virtue in action?
Well, he believed in this idea of ponos.
Ponos.
Yeah, which basically means toil or labor. And he thought that actually enduring hardship was key to strengthening your will and building virtue.
So not exactly a life of luxury and ease.
No, not really.
It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is, like
embracing hardship to build a better life.
But he saw hardship as a chance to grow.
Right, so it's like testing your limits.
Yeah, and he believed that by doing that, we kind of develop this inner strength.
Yeah, that helps us navigate all the ups and downs of life.
It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. He saw it as like forging steel in fire.
Ah, I like it.
The heat makes it stronger.
And he wasn't just talking about physical strength.
No, he was talking about mental and emotional resilience too.
This reminds me of like modern ideas, like grit and growth mindset.
Totally. He was way ahead of his time.
He was in recognizing that.
But he also had these kind of unconventional views when it came to language and logic.
Right.
You mentioned he was a nominalist.
Oh, yeah.
Remind me what that means.
Okay, so basically nominalism is the idea that abstract concepts like beauty or justice, they don't really exist independently of the specific things we perceive as beautiful or just.
So it's all about the concrete, the observable, the real.
Keep it real.
And that's so different from a lot of other philosophers of his time.
Yeah, I mean, think about Plato, right? Plato's all about these abstract forms.
Exactly. Yeah. Plato believed that there were these perfect, eternal forms of things, like beauty, justice, truth, that existed in this separate realm of pure ideas.
And Antisthenes was like, no way.
No, he wasn't buying it.
He was like, those are just ideas.
Yeah, he thought we could only really know specific examples.
This is like that whole debate.
Yes.
Is beauty objective or subjective?
Right.
Plato would say there's some ideal standard of beauty.
Yeah.
But Antisthenes would probably be like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly.
It's about what resonates with you.
Totally.
Yeah.
He was really interested in how our knowledge is rooted in our perceptions of individual things.
Okay.
And that language is simply a tool to describe those perceptions.
So he wasn't interested in building these like big abstract systems to explain the universe.
Nope.
It's about, let's get real.
Let's get real.
What are we experiencing?
What are we
observing?
He was all about practicality.
And how did that play into his ideas about virtue?
Well, he had a very straightforward view of virtue.
Yeah.
He believed it was the only true good, and that chasing pleasure was a distraction.
Okay.
Even a danger.
So he was very different.
Very different.
From a lot of other thinkers.
Yes. He saw virtue as this combination of self-sufficiency, mastering your desires, and living a life guided by reason.
So aligning your actions with your values.
Exactly.
It's a very active approach.
It is.
To virtue.
It's not passive.
Like you're not just waiting for good things to happen.
It's making them happen.
You're making choices.
Yes.
You're taking action.
It's not something you just have.
Right.
It's something you do.
It's a process.
It is a process.
It's growth.
Growth. He was all about that growth mindset.
Even back then.
Even back then.
So it's not about reaching some like ultimate state of perfection.
No, it's about constantly trying to become a better version of yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that focus on action is what makes this so relevant today.
Yes.
It's not just about reading books or having these intellectual debates.
Right.
It's about how do we apply these ideas to our everyday lives.
He gives us a roadmap.
He does.
For living a more meaningful life.
A more fulfilling life.
Yeah, one that's grounded in self-mastery.
And resilience.
And a deep commitment.
It's a virtue.
To living in accordance with reason and virtue.
It's so inspiring.
It is.
But I have to wonder,
how
challenging was it to actually put these teachings into practice?
Right.
Did his students face any pushback from Athenian society?
Oh, absolutely.
Because these ideas seem pretty controversial.
They were. Remember, he was challenging the very foundation of Athenian values.
Right, like wealth, status, pleasure.
Status.
And he's like, no.
No.
There's something else.
It's about virtue.
So his students who adopted this simple lifestyle and these unconventional beliefs, they must have been seen as outsiders.
They were, like the counterculture movement of their time.
It's like the original hipsters.
Yeah.
Rejecting all the trappings of materialism and social conformity.
Totally.
In favor of this simpler, more virtuous life.
A more authentic life.
Even though it was challenging.
It was definitely challenging.
And their ideas, even though they were met with resistance, would pave the way for all these other philosophical movements.
Like Stoicism.
Stoicism.
Epicureanism.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these ancient ideas can still feel so relevant today.
Especially when we think about all the pressures of consumerism.
Right.
And this constant need for external validation.
All the likes.
Yes.
All the followers.
Antisthenes is like an antidote.
He is.
To the anxieties of modern life.
Yeah.
He's like, true happiness comes from within.
Yes.
Not from
external
validation or material possessions.
It's powerful.
It is.
It's like he's encouraging us to step back, to question our priorities, and to really focus on cultivating that inner strength.
And living a life that's aligned with our values. This is all great.
Yeah.
But do you have any like stories or anecdotes about his life.
Ooh, I do.
That really illustrate his character,
Yeah.
his dedication to this philosophy.
Okay, so there's this story
Okay.
about Antisthenes and this wealthy Athenian named Ismenias, who was known for his lavish lifestyle. And Ismenias decides to invite Antisthenes over for dinner. And true to his principles, Antisthenes shows up in his typical simple attire.
Cloak, staff, wallet.
The whole getup.
Yeah.
And Ismenias is kind of taken aback by his guests' simple clothes.
No bling.
No bling, no jewelry. And he starts showing off all this luxurious furniture. Bragging about how much everything costs, how rare it is.
I could just picture Antisthenes.
I know.
With a raised eyebrow.
Yeah.
A wry smile.
Maybe a little chuckle.
And some witty retort.
Oh, totally. And Antisthenes, completely unfazed by all this display of wealth, it just looks at him and says, I see you have many possessions, Ismenias, but tell me, do you possess virtue?
Boom.
Mic drop.
That is so Antisthenes. It's like cutting through all of that pretense.
Yes.
And getting to the heart of what really matters.
True wealth isn't about material possessions.
It's about character.
It's about living a virtuous life.
I love that story.
It's a good one.
It really brings his philosophy to life.
It does.
It shows how he navigated these social situations with wit and wisdom.
And integrity.
Yeah.
He didn't compromise his values.
And it's a reminder that we don't have to either.
No, we don't.
We can stay true to ourselves.
Yes.
And still make a powerful impact.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway.
It is.
From Antisthenes.
But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
I want to leave you with a question.
Ooh.
A question.
Just ponder.
If Antisthenes believed that even a bad reputation could be a good thing, if it meant staying true to your values, what does that say about how we approach our own values and actions?
Ooh.
Especially when they challenge the norm.
That's a good one.
It makes you think about what are we willing to stand up for, even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable.
What does integrity mean to you?
It's about finding that inner compass.
Yes.
And having the courage to follow it.
Even when it's hard.
Even when the path is less traveled.
I like that.
And that's a powerful thought to carry with us.
It is.
As we move into the final part of our deep dive.
Righty.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Antisthenes. We've covered so much ground already, from his radical ideas about virtue to his witty takedowns of Athenian materialism.
It's been quite a journey, and for anyone who's ready to go even deeper, don't forget to check out the show notes. We've got links to his writings, commentaries from scholars, and even articles that connect his ideas to issues we face today.
It's amazing to see how his philosophy is still so relevant thousands of years later.
It really is. I especially recommend his work, Cyrus. It's a dialogue that explores leadership and virtue, and it really gives you a sense of how Antisthenes applied his principles in real-world situations.
That sounds fascinating. I'll definitely have to check that out.
You should. It's a great read.
Speaking of applying his ideas to the real world, what do you think Antisthenes would have to say about our modern world? You know, with all the technology, the emphasis on consumerism, and the constant presence of social media.
That's a great question. Knowing Antisthenes and his focus on simplicity and inner strength, I think he'd probably have some pretty strong opinions about our obsession with gadgets and our constant need for external validation.
I can just picture him walking through Silicon Valley in his cloak and sandals, totally bewildered by everyone staring at their screens.
Right. He'd probably be like, what are you all doing? Go outside. Talk to a real person.
Exactly. He'd be all about logging off, disconnecting from the digital noise, and focusing on what truly matters. Real connections, meaningful experiences, and living in alignment with your values.
I think you're spot on. He might even see social media as a modern form of the flattery and empty praise he warned against. Remember, he was all about living according to reason and virtue, not letting the opinions of others dictate your worth.
He'd probably encourage us to be more mindful about what we consume, too. Not just in terms of material possessions, but also information and experiences.
Absolutely. Quality over quantity. Experiences over possessions. It's about making choices that nourish your soul and contribute to the well-being of others, not just accumulating stuff for the sake of it.
It's about living a more intentional life.
Exactly. Antisthenes would challenge us to step back from the frenetic pace of modern life, to simplify our lives, and to focus on what truly brings us joy and fulfillment.
It's like he's offering us a guide to a more authentic, grounded way of being.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. He reminds us that true happiness doesn't come from external things, but from cultivating inner peace, aligning our actions with our values, and finding contentment in the present moment.
It's been an amazing journey exploring the philosophy of Antisthenes. I'm so grateful for your insights.
It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it thought-provoking and inspiring.
And remember, as Antisthenes would say, virtue is the only true good. So go out there and live a life worthy of that pursuit.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep challenging assumptions, and keep striving to be the best version of yourselves.
Farewell.